Unit 5 is operations. So, okay, well, what's so important about this unit? Well, this unit really reflects the important part of the business plan where you actually talk about how the business is actually going to work. Okay, so that's really a big component of it. And it flows into the next assignment in terms of the content. And what we're looking at in here is a lot of things with regards to how the business operates, type of location it's where it's located, depending, and again, that's going to make a difference with regards to how well the business will work under the circumstances in which the business works. You know, if it's a service firm, or if it's a manufacturing firm, or if it's a retail firm, location is going to have an impact on either one of those, so we need to consider. So yesterday, or last time we met, whenever that was, we were looking at this idea of operations from the point of what it is. It's the physical making the facility work. It includes things like locations, layout, supply, inventory, these sorts of things. We talked about inventory. We talked about the process or the operation as being kind of like a black box type system where we have stuff that comes in called inputs that is stuffed into a magic box where things are done with it, which is called the process, and out the other end pops an output. So a factory will bring raw materials in, process the materials, and as an output, it will produce cars, trucks, whatever that the factory produces. This is very much focused on a production system where you're making things as opposed to service, right? We also looked very briefly, and I think I don't want to go overboard in this, how in order to create a production process, we have a bunch of tools available to us that help streamline the process so it works more efficiently, okay? And we were talking about one example called the PERT. And PERT is a program evaluation and review technique. It is a statistical-based tool that allows or forces you, I would say probably it allows you to, but it's for production planning. It allows you to think about the production process, break it into its rudimentary fundamental steps, and then consider how long each part of the process is going to take in that step. And considering that some things are parallel, meaning they can happen at the same time, or some things are serial, we could really figure out how long it's going to take to produce something, okay, using the PERT. And if we can figure that out, it will help us in terms of ordering, in terms of how many people have on the assembly line. It does a lot of things with regards to making sure that we have an efficient process. And we looked at a little video. Again, whenever we get into PERT, it's a little deeper than the context of this course. All I want you to understand is that it is a system that allows you to schedule and to predict and to plan, okay, in terms of breaking a production task into its subcomponents and then estimating how long it would take to do each one. And from there, we can determine how long it's going to take to actually do something. We looked at a little sample of a PERT, you know, for example, building a house or a cabin or something along those lines. We break it down into its fundamental steps. And I said, well, you know, there's really only 4 or 5 fundamental steps to build a house. We got to put in a foundation, we got to put a floor, we got to put walls, we got to put a roof on it, and the rafters, I should say, of the roof, and then the roof. And if we know how long each step takes, so foundation a week, floors 2 weeks, walls 1 week, rafters 1 week, and the roof 1 week, and we think about the task in order, and we ask ourselves, you know, can any of that be done at the same time? And if it can, that's great, because we can cut down our total production time because we can do 2 things simultaneously. If it can't be done, and it has to be done sequentially, all we do is add up the total times, and it will give us how long it will take, or how long we predict it would take to build a house, in this case, 6 weeks. We looked at the example of building a structure such as the GBS. The 2 GBSs that were built in Newfoundland now include Hibernia and Hebron. They were both built in the same process. The top side was built separate from the bottom side, which is mostly underwater. So the bottom side is largely concrete. The top side is largely steel and structure, I'll call it steel structure. So what we need to be able to do is to plan this item and to plan this item as two parallel projects. So basically project A and project B, they have to come together at the same time so we can physically link the two. So we need to be able to schedule them so they both end at the same time. And this is where scheduling comes in important. So that was the basic issue of scheduling, just to give you an idea how important scheduling is to manufacturing or production processes. We also, in this unit, look at this concept, total quality management. Now, total quality management has been beat around since World War II, and it is part of the, I'll call it, leaning of business procedures to ensure that we get a very efficient production process. And effectively, what total quality management really deals with, it is as much a philosophy as a way of doing things. But if we say to ourselves, what we will do is endeavor to ensure quality is built into a product through every stage of the production process. That would be really defined as in providing a total quality management process. And how do we do that? Well, we ask consumers, what do they want? We provide consumers what they want. We try to manufacture things by looking at efficiencies, looking at our production, looking at our distribution, looking at the ability to continuously improve, and working our people in such a way that people work as teams and everybody is responsible for quality. So quality management helps businesses kind of focus on the long term and constantly resolving to increase their quality as they go along. Okay, so that kind of, it just kind of gives a little brief overview of quality. Now we get into the more practical end of how do we actually make something, okay? How do we actually do it? From an operations point of view, let's think about a process. And whenever we think about a process, the physical facilities and the layout of the facilities play an important role. If we need a building that builds airplanes, for example, we need a fairly tall building. We need large garage doors. We need hangar doors, really. So we really need to think about, what type of facility do we need in order to do the things that we suggest to do? If we're doing a retail store, we need to think about, store frontage. We need to think about the appeal of the store frontage. We need to think about things like parking. We need to think of things about size and layout of the store itself. If we think about a service firm really doesn't rely so much on physical facilities as it does the process to get it to the customer. Okay? So what factors really play into layout and design then for any type of business, regardless if it's retail, service, or manufacturing? Well, we got to think about some key things that small business should really think about, because small business starts off small and usually grows. So we have to think about the long term and what are the things we can do now in order to make sure that we allow the long term to evolve. Well, first of all, one of the key things that you would look at whenever you're thinking about layout design or building a structure is the ability to expand it. Okay, we need to be able to grow with the market. So we have room for future expansion and room for change. And facilities really should be designed so that they can be expanded. If you think about places like here in Clarenville, see, most of us are here in Clarenville now. If you look at the Walmart up there, the Walmart was built in 2006. There it was, yes, 2006. And if you look over on I'm going to call it the left-hand side, so facing the place, on the left-hand side, you'll see a big grassy area, or it's probably covered in snow now, but big grassy area. That area is specifically designed, that was part of the original plan, for expansion. So if Walmart needed to expand, when they built it, they built in a piece of land there to allow for expansion. It hasn't expanded yet. Well, we'll see what happens. But there is space there for expansion. So that's good. Most businesses should think about that whenever they're building and say, are we boxed in? If we are boxed in, what can we do in order to allow our business to get bigger without having to move? We also got to think about flow of movement, and this is what I'll look at in a second, but how does a product that is manufactured or produced or a service, if it's provided, how does that work? What is the flow? What are the touch points when someone comes into the place to get something done, like their oil changed or maybe to go up for blood work? Any number of things. What is the flow of people? Where do they go? What is the flow of equipment, cars, trucks, these sorts of things? We should consider that before we ever produce anything. So production and layout are important there. We also have to think about this concept of materials handling. And materials handling is largely how the product is moved from point A to point B with the minimum amount of movement for the maximum amount of benefit, okay? Because every time we move something, it costs money. And is it adding any value to it is the question that's being asked. So we really need to think about how we can do stuff efficiently. And when you think about materials handling too, you're also thinking about storage, storing stuff. Do we have massive room for storage? Should we have a lot of storage? Should we have a just-in-time system? These are the things that come into play. One of the greatest inventions ever made regarding materials handling was the sea container, or the sea cans as they're often called. You see them on ships. You see them on the backs of trucks. They're 40-foot long or 50-foot long, depending on what, 20-foot long. They come in various sizes, but they are large metal boxes. And those large metal boxes were invented during the Vietnam War by the US military. And the idea was we want to be able to do materials handling in such a way that we don't really have to touch the materials too much. And once they're loaded, we can move them very easily. Before that point in time, things were loaded individually. So we had containers of salt, for example, boxes of salt or bags of salt. It was a very inefficient way to move things. These containers and containerization has allowed for, not only has it easy to put on a ship, but you can take it off a ship and put it on a truck, and you can put it on a truck, and you can put it on a boat, you can put it on an airplane, on a train. All of them are standardized so they'll fit in various mechanisms of moving. So the sea container has been an example of cost cutting thanks to consideration for design of how we can better do it. We also think about our output needs. What size output do we need to produce? And are we producing a plant that's too big for our output? Are the sales going to match the output? We also think about space utilization. Do we have a lot of wasted space? Is space used efficiently? Is it generating revenue? For example, in a retail outlet, if you got a lot of empty space in your retail outlet, I always think about Chapters. If you walk into Chapters, that big center aisle that is underneath the dome, that used to be a pretty free aisle. It has been used now more for putting books in, but Chapters really had a lot of wasted space there in that. It made the place look nice, but was it worth anything in terms of sales space? Ease of communication and support. Does this layout lead or lend to easy communication and easy support? Can you get a truck in there, fix something? Can people easily walk from point A to point B? Is it too far away? Does the product flow through there easily? And this always goes back to our organizational behavior consideration of, does it allow people to work in a pleasant environment? And finally, we got this issue of promotional value. A nice store is always very good for promotional value. Think about Costco and how those big box Costco's are really designed as much for promotion as anything. They put their big sign on it. They allow people to come in. It's a wide open space. And these sorts of things. If we think about manufacturing firms in particular, we got to think about space from a more narrower focus. We got to plan the interior. What should the interior look like? Where are the plugins? Where are the machines that make the things? What kind of electrical, plumbing, hydraulic fluid, these types of issues, how does that get set up? Receiving and output, where, is it easy to get material in? Does it come in at the beginning of the line? It should, because that's where products are going to get assembled. And the obvious thing is on the backside, when the product is made, is there the the idea of getting it out of the factory quickly onto a train, a truck, or whatever to get it off to market. We also got to consider safety, and we got to think about things like lighting and the ability to meet human needs there. And maintenance and cleaning is obviously important. If we think about a production facility in particular, production facilities tend to follow the flow of the product, okay? It is really geared up so the product moves from point station A to point station B to point station C in a natural way, meaning that if you have to saw it first and then drill it, the saw table comes first along the line, the drill table comes second, okay? So we can see here in this particular diagram that we have a product A. It comes out of storage, it gets sawed, it gets drilled, it gets sanded, it gets assembled, painted, and then finished storage. Product B comes out of raw materials. If it's, this is more wood, this is more metal. So it gets lathed, it gets milled, it gets sanded, it gets assembled, it gets varnished, and so on. Or product C, which is it gets moved from storage to saw to lathe to heat treating to planting or plating, to storage. So it really depends on type of product. But the thing is that it will follow a natural flow. It should follow a natural flow as the product, as the work gets done on the product. This so that's known as the product layout, which is really geared up for the product. We can also think about layout from a more of a process point of view, where it's designed for factories that manufacture many different custom-made products. So, this is not so much an assembly line. This one here, the product layout, is more of an assembly line. This is more of a station. So we have drills, lathes, finishing here. So the product could go in any direction at all. Everything is kind of in the center and the things come around it. So it's more geared up for a custom-made product as opposed to a whole bunch of similar things. And we also have this fixed position product. Now, if you think about certain products are fairly big. Airplanes, for example, tend to be fairly big. A Boeing 747 or a 787 or a 777, it's a really big piece of equipment. You can't really move it easily. So the fixed position system really says, okay, the product stays in the center and all the work is done on it. And you put the equipment around it. So the saws, the drills, the sanding machines are surrounding it as it is assembled. So this is pretty common. Usually large and cumbersome products, as they say. So that's manufacturing. We also look at retail and we say, okay, well, how should retail firms be set up? Well, if you think about a retail, you got the outside of the store and the inside of the store. So the outside of the store is meant to be attractive to draw people in. So you need something on the outside to draw people in. And the interior, once they get in the store and they cross the threshold into the store, they have to be able to make a positive judgment on the store as soon as you walk through the door. Because that's effectively what you do whenever you walk into a retail store. You make a judgment on, is there something here for me within about 10 seconds of entering the door? So you really need to focus on that as a retailer. So if we think about displays, now these displays could be window displays or something as you walk through the door displays. It is really very much focused on, that's the first thing you're going to see when you go to the store, whether you're outside looking in or whether you're inside looking around, okay? These displays are very important. And the displays are what will hook people, because people are going to make that decision. Is there something here for me in the first 10 or 15 seconds? So you really need to have a good display. So what do we do? Well, in terms of display, we have to be able to come up with some ideas in order to make it attractive. Some ideas include things like layering, which is start with an information in the window, then place items midway between the window and tall backdrops. So we got basically a low level items at the front and progressively higher levels, similar to what you do when you're taking a picture. Put the short people in the front, the taller people in the back. The other thing that we often try to do is tell a story in the window. If you think about Christmas time, for example, normally windows are dressed so that they tell a story, be it the Christmas story or be it Frosty the Snowman. We see that. So these window displays should communicate a theme, a basic idea. Simplicity, keep it simple, stupid rolls here too. The KISS principle, where it shouldn't be so gaudy that it drives people away. They need to be able to see it, and beauty and simplicity is important. Bold and innovative, something that captures people's attention tends to be bold and innovative. And the obvious thing of variety, displays should be changed every once in a while to create. So you see stores doing a lot of changes to their frontage often, particularly in malls and these sorts of things, in order to draw people in. So the physical display is really important in attracting people and getting them inside the store, making the store sticky so they actually stay there. If we think about retail space, retail space is an interesting one too, because you ask yourself from an operational point of view, what items in my store make me the most money? And that's really what we need to be able to do. And in this age of scanning and UPCs and things like that, it becomes very easy to gather a whole bunch of information, computerized information, as stuff is sold in the store. Figure out what customers are buying. You'll know based on your inventory system, your computerized inventory system, that customers will tend to buy things at certain rates. So if you're Walmart, for example, Walmart is a good example. When you walk into Walmart, there's a whole bunch of things in that store. What do people buy most? What are the most valuable things that people buy in that store? And when you think about it, you need to be able to place those things at the spot where people will find them most easily. So when we think about a store, this is the front. Let's assume this is the front door of the store. When studies have shown that people tend to turn right when they go into the store. I think about 90% of people will turn right when they go into the store. And that's where you put your high value items. And when people turn right, they'll go second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and from there, you can pretty well say that people work their way to the back slowly but surely. So you're going to want to be able to use your space in such a way that the most valuable, or the things that people buy most, is right here. You want to be able to, the things that are most valuable to you in terms of sales, that's going to be right here. You want to be able to get that straightened away. So you'll be able to determine where the valuable spots of your store are. Companies like Walmart and Canadian Tire are constantly evaluating the numbers for stuff in their store. Let's take Walmart, for example. Walmart made a decision in Canada 2 years ago to get rid of their automotive fixing business. Some of the larger Walmarts had an automotive spot in it that you could get tires put on and things like that. They looked at that and they said that just wasn't making enough money to warrant the space that it took up. If you think, a garage area takes up a lot of space. So they decided to cut it. So Walmart took that out of their stores here in Canada. And if you look at places like Walmart, every once in a while the shelves gets changed, or I'm going to say move around the store. Canadian Tire does it the same. All that is based on the stats from what they get from their sales. They're going to ask what items sell, what items are not selling, how much dollars per square foot do that square foot bring in. So we look at every square foot or every square meter of the store, and we ask, how much is that space contributing to the overall sales of the store? And if that space is below normal, then that space is going to be looked at to say, maybe we could put something in there that's higher value. So you'll see that stores often have enlarged as time goes on. Certain parts of the store would enlarge. So, for example, we see the grocery section of Walmart getting larger, and other sections like pits may be getting lower. And it really is based on their sales. And you really need to assess this as your store goes along. What parts of your store are valuable and which parts aren't so valuable, and be able to judge accordingly for in terms of how much space you allocate to that. In terms of retail too, retail tends to fall into a couple of different types of categories. It's either what we call a grid type layout, and Walmart, Canadian Tire, all of the major ones have a grid type layout. The grocery stores, this involves shelves placed in areas. So we have a lineup of shelves and aisles, and people will go there to buy it. Now, the good thing about this system is that people know exactly where things are. You can find it easily. It's a good productive use of space and the like. So, a lot of companies who are selling standardized products like this type of setup. It's a valuable type of setup for them. Other stores are, depending on what they're selling, might appreciate a free flow type system where there are like little stores within the big store. So little sections. So we have some sections. I've been into Bass River, or Bass River got bought by what is the name of that? Cabela's. Cabela's have this type of a type of setup. So you end up with different sections, fishing rods, for example, and versus boats and these sorts of things. So this allows for a rather free flow of customers around the various items. So overall, then, if we look at if we step back a bit and we say, okay, let's look at the broader picture now of space, we need to think about location from the point of view of how important it is. And in marketing, it says there's three important things in marketing: location, location, location. Location is critically important, where you're physically located. And depending on what you're selling, space, that location could make a difference with regards to whether you make or don't make. So location decisions can have a really big impact on your revenues and a really big impact on your costs. One thing I'll just tell you with the town, for example, we get a lot of concern from people up on the Shoal Harbor Drive area, the companies up on the Shoal Harbor Drive area, that they're paying high taxes. And they are, because the land values up there are higher, and your taxes is really hooked to your value of your land. But again, Shoal Harbor Drive is really the prime business district. So the sites up there are valuable sites in terms of lots of people driving by and lots of eyeballs, but they also come at a higher cost. So these location decisions, whenever you think about where to put a store, where you're going to put some sort of a space, you really need to think about. What is important to me in terms of what the customer needs, what I need for my physical space. Is it all okay? So we got to think about it from the customer's point of view, most importantly. We got to think about it from the staff's point of view. Is there parking? Are staff easily getting there? We got to think about other support services. Things like snow clearing could come into play, right? Cost, how much it costs to buy the premises, or to pay the rent on the premises, or to pay the taxes on the premises. The economy itself, the demographics in the area. Are we really in a city full of older people or younger people? Is it really a good idea, for example, to put a kids store in a town that is full of older people? And can you find workers? And that's a big problem in Newfoundland. It's nice to be located in rural Newfoundland, but the problem is there's very few workers in rural Newfoundland who are willing to do certain jobs. We got to think about town zoning or city zoning. Zoning comes into play. You can't build, in this town, for example, you can't build an apartment building anywhere. there are certain parts of the town that are geared up for residential, and there are other parts of the town that are geared up for commercial. And you cannot put a commercial development in a residential, and you can't put a residential in a commercial as a general rule. There are mixed, no doubt about it, but you'll find that all houses tend to be clumped together and all businesses tend to be clumped together, and that's done purposely. So we need to think about that from a location decision. There is a little, in your textbook, there's a little a chart which is kind of neat to be able to do an evaluation on the site and say, what works, what doesn't work. So in terms of retailing, there's a lot of factors that are critical and there are some factors that are not so critical. So they've just gone and done a rating here for different things. So for example, retail, there's a lot of ones and twos in retail, meaning that most things, such as the building features or the dimensions or the window space, are really, really important. Whereas wholesaling or even storage, those things probably wouldn't be so important. So what we find is that retail has a lot of things that are important, whereas wholesale, where the customer is not really coming into the store, is not as important. We also need to contemplate inventory management. Now, inventory management deals with probably the most important short-term asset that you have. Okay, so it's very important. It's a big asset. It's an expensive asset. When you are up to your eyeballs in inventory, it means that you have money tied up. It's good from your customer's point of view, but not so good from your point of view because the inventory is very expensive. So inventory really includes business goods that are available for sale and the raw materials used to produce these goods. So you can think of raw material inventory or you can think of finished goods inventory. The inventory's current asset represents one of the business's most important assets and it's the primary source of revenue, so it's very important. Why do we hold inventory? Well, we got to hold it because there's a number of good reasons, not the least of which is customer satisfaction. The customer wants to be able to come into your store, ask for a part, and hopefully you got it. So customer needs need to be met by most stores. So inventory is important in order to meet those customer needs. But having too much inventory, as I say, costs you a lot of money. So you cannot have so much inventory that it goes obsolete, it gets lost, it breaks, it gets cold, it runs out of date, these sorts of things. So we need to find some balance. So we need to think too about the trade-off between storing stuff and shipping stuff. Shipping stuff is expensive. You put it on a truck, especially in the last few months, the cost of shipping has gone up quite a bit because the price of fuel's gone up, storage has gone up, and it costs a lot more money to get things now moved than it did 2 years ago. So we need to think about inventory too from the point of view of where are we getting our products? Where are we sourcing it from? Is it all over the place? Is it just here? Is it across the world? Is it across the country? Is it across the city? Think about things like masks, the N95 mask. In the last 2 years, those things have gone up in value because of the COVID. They were widely available before, but COVID, they disappeared. If you recall, 2 years ago, it was very hard, if not impossible, to get an N95 mask or Lysol cleaner. I thought I had some here, but Lysol wipes disappeared. So that's a big problem is when inventory dries up because of shocks to the system such as that. So we really need to think about where do we get our inventory to? And we really got to be able to go out and look for really good suppliers. And for a small business, that's a challenge. And you're going to have to think about for your business plan, who is going to supply you the products? Where do you get the raw material? Where can you get the best deal for that raw material? Are you paying premium price for it? A lot of people say, well, I can get it so much cheaper in China. Yeah, there are advantages to that, but there's some problems with it too. If you think about domestic sourcing, for example, normally meets the health, buying it here in Canada, it meets the health and safety standards. Communication is easy. Marketing appeal is good. Always nice to see made in Canada written on stuff. Easy to verify who the manufacturers are and if they meet certain standards. Quick shipping time. No duties and tariffs on it. For intellectual property, which is non-items, but stuff like patents and things, you know that there are rules around it, and the people who invented it are probably going to get paid for it. Whereas in the international realm, that may not happen. So if you think about some of the challenges of domestic sources, they tend to be more expensive. There's probably less choice. So now let's look, well, what's so good about international? Well, international is lower prices normally, especially if it comes out of China because labor costs are so much lower. Higher number of manufacturers to choose from, so you got competition between them. And the internet has made it so easy to get in contact with those folks that it doesn't really matter that there's borders or distance between you anymore. However, international sourcing comes with all kinds of challenges. We see, for example, the situation in Ukraine has meant that Russian goods are no longer available in Canada, and that has had an impact on a lot of companies. Potentially lower perceived quality is a thing when you buy it internationally, and sometimes lower manufacturing labor standards. And that is a big selling feature for a lot of companies to say, we made in Canada, we respect people's rights, human rights, and the like. Cultural language differences, what you think you bought, what you got, could be different things because of that. And it's a longer shipping time. It takes 6 weeks for a ship to get from China to here. And security, payment security, product security, these sorts of things. You don't know who you're buying from. That's another big problem. So these kind of summarize some of the pluses and the minuses of product sourcing. So as a company, then, you're starting up your business and you're thinking to yourself, okay, I need to plan ahead in terms of where to get my sources of supply now. What should you do? Well, go after and look for potential sources of suppliers. You need to be able to track them down. The internet is your friend with regards to that. Could be international, could be domestic, but you want to try it out. Then once you do that, you say, well, okay, instead of making a commitment to a supplier, can I ask for samples? Most suppliers will provide samples. If you're stuff, if it's stuff you're looking for. I take, for example, in my job, the textbooks. It's no sweat to get textbooks from the publisher to review. That's an example of a sample. You make your first order a small order. Don't go buying huge amounts. Tend to buy small amounts to start with, just to check and make sure it works. Build a relationship with those folks. That's important. And then make sure that you can get good information on suppliers, and the internet helps provide that. So websites, lots of websites out there. For example, these websites that I have here, Worldwide Brands and Wholesale to Be and Thomasnet. These have existed for years, a lot of these in print form. Now they're all online, of where to source products. And they're like review organizations. LinkedIn is also a good source of where to find potential suppliers. LinkedIn is the Facebook for work, and it will certainly help you link up with potential suppliers for products very easily doing simple searches. And the federal government has the North American Industrial Classification System, which you learned about in marketing. And it is a system that is from Canada, United States. It operates in Canada, United States, and Mexico. And it gives a number so you can search various suppliers for various products. You can do very good searches. Trade shows are important in order to get information. You can go to trade shows. And we saw, the advantage of coming through with multiple sources of supply. Today, in terms of new, I just wanted to look at this idea of what we got to consider when we think about inventory and managing it. So when we're writing a business plan, these are some questions we need to ask ourselves and answer in the business plan. how are we going to handle our inventory is really a big thing, because inventory is a big, important asset that you have in your business, and banks particularly are going to want to know, what are you doing with that asset? So we think about different types of inventory. There's raw material, there's work in progress, stuff that's on the assembly line, and finished goods. And we have some element of maintenance, repair, and operating supplies as well. So we need to think about each of those. Where are we getting our raw material? Where are we storing it? Work in progress. How long is it going to take for it to finish? Is this something that is ongoing? Or is it really what we call finished goods, which is the end product, the stuff we sell? And how long does that sit on the shelf? Because it's not making money for us if it's sat on the shelf. And just from marketing as well, we looked at this idea of inventory. It's a great idea to have it. The more we have, though, the holding costs are higher. So if this is our cost of holding inventory, less of it is less expensive, more of it is more expensive. The trade-off is, if we keep lots of inventory, we don't have to order too much, so our ordering costs go down. But if we keep a little bit of inventory, we're going to be ordering a lot more. So we got to find the sweet spot that's somewhere between maximizing ordering costs and maximizing our holding costs. So really, our total cost is lowest at this sweet spot. And really, it's going to take some experience or some figuring in order to figure out what type of a system are you going to use. How much inventory will keep? How much is inventory costing to hold? How much is ordering costing? And as I say, ordering costs have gone up quite a bit now as transportation costs have risen. Okay, in terms of managing inventory, we got to make sure we got excellent record keeping, because our inventory is expensive. We don't know what we got on the shelf. It makes it very difficult. So we need packing lists, record keeping of it as it comes in, delivery receipts, issuance reports, shipping documentation. Depending on the type of product, that could be a lot of it, or if it's a relatively small amount of inventory, it won't be too much. We got to make sure that there's correct information on labels and tags. We got to make sure the stock room is well organized. And the thing is, it has to have limited access. Not everyone should have access to the stock room, because stuff can grow legs and disappear. And good housekeeping is important, meaning we don't have so much stock all over the place that we can't find anything. Storage units should hold a fixed standard amount of items. The large stores, Walmart, for example, their shelves are designed for the products on them, so that we know exactly how much is on the shelf by looking at the shelf. It's a much faster way to manage inventory. And the storage shelf's got to be in the right location. If we can't get a forklift into where the shelf is no good. So, it's important to be able to do that. And we need to be able to periodically do inventory counts. And how can we do inventory counts? Normally we get 1,000 people in and we start counting stuff, and that's a challenge. Inventory is usually done by most small businesses once a year. You got to start counting bolts, nuts, things like that. And that can be a tedious job. So one of the things that has come up as of late is RFID technology. And RFID technology, if you have a rather new car, as you walk towards the car, the dark car unlocks. Or if you got a push button ignition, the car starts by just having the keys close. Or in the case of your house, your phone or your cell phone, you can ring it, or Bluetooth, that type of thing. RFID technology is radio frequency identification tags. That's what it stands for. And effectively, what these things do is they send out a signal, electronic signal, to tell the receiver, which is like a little handheld device, could be your cell phone, that it's there. And RFID is becoming more popular, especially for high value inventory items. For lower value inventory items, we also have things like QR codes. We're all familiar with QR codes now that the pandemic's through. And so these sorts of things, these technological things, are being brought in. You can also buy, buy software for your cell phone, apps that do counting. So if you got lumber, for example, you take a picture of the lumber and it will count. Well, it won't estimate, it will count how many pieces are there. If it does a side picture, it will do the counting for you. So the technology has been really brought to bear on inventory control and management right now. So we really need to consider good ways to manage your inventory. Keep enough for what's called a safety stock so that we don't run out of inventory, but not so much that it just becomes onerous on us in terms of a cost. So that, in summary, is a quick review of the operations